Hello all, welcome back to my CCSP exam review. Hope you're doing great. We are going to cover today the domain 3 of CCSP, which is called as a cloud platform and infrastructure security. I will be your instructor or presenter. My name is Prab Nair, and for more information you can visit my LinkedIn profile where you can get to know about my certifications and my skill set. So before going to start this domain overview, let me give you the high level introduction of this domain. So the goal of cloud platform and infrastructure security is to provide you with the knowledge regarding both the physical and the virtual component of the cloud infrastructure. In this domain, you will gain knowledge of the risk management analysis, including the tools, techniques necessary for maintaining a secure cloud infrastructure. You can say like this, let's suppose you're working for the Amazon or you're working for a cloud provider. Okay, what are their day-to-day activities, how they basically manage the data center, starting from building the services and configuring the servers, what are the necessary components which is required, all are basically going to be covered in domain 3. Those who are preparing for CCSP exam, it is my suggestion or it's my advice, give proper attention to domain 3 because it is like a domain security operation of a CISSP. You can say like that because we're going to cover about the core part of a cloud provider operation. Example, right? Basically building my own organization. I'm building my own cloud services from a scratch. It means I'm talking about building my own data center. I'm defining my own structures, cloud services, and all that. So this domain is covered from that point of view. Okay, not like a domain one where we're going to discuss about the foundation of a cloud. In domain 2 we're discussing about how to protect data in the cloud. So domain 1 and domain 2 is more like a the terms between the client and server, client and provider. But in domain 3 we are talking about how things works in the cloud environment, no matter you're working for any cloud provider or you're working for the company who building their own cloud services. Understood? Like this domain is talking about from building the data center, in which we are going to discuss about building the logical components, building the servers. In a servers we're talking about the computations, in which we're going to discuss about how we divide those computations, what is the importance of share and all that. So that is something is going to be covered in domain 3. In domain 3 we also discuss about the security of a cloud platform and infrastructure security that should be driven by the business requirement related to the confidentiality, integrity and availability. This domain also consider the risk to the physical, logical and virtual environment. You can select that this domain will consider the risk to the physical, logical and virtual environment as a cloud consumer and provider, along with corresponding countermeasures to those risks, because that is a turning point of a CCSP. Along with that, the new addition is there in a domain 3 all about BCDR, business continuity disaster recovery, where we using cloud as a secondary site. In what conditions we can use cloud as a secondary site, what are the strategies following risk associated with the cloud as a BCDR, that we're going to discuss. So let's start this domain overview. So first part of this domain, you can say we have organized this domain 3 into modules. The first module is basically called as a cloud infrastructure comprehend cloud infrastructure component. I'm sorry, the first module of this domain is basically called as a cloud infrastructure comprehend cloud infrastructure component. Okay, so in this module you can see we have a several components. Example, we're going to discuss about the physical environment, then we have a network and communication, we're talking about the compute, we're talking about the virtualization, storage, management plane. So once you complete this module, you can able to get an understanding about the network functionalities, what kind of a network functionalities we have, network functionalities and relationship to the cloud services. And we also going to understand about the management plane function. Okay, how we basically operate the management plane and the virtualization functions. You can say like that in this model we focus more on the management plane and the virtualization. Another important thing in this particular domain, we have a SDN. Okay, the one more important topic, we have a SDN, software defined network. In SDN we have a 3 layers, because SDN is basically used for software defined network, by which we can able to create a network virtualization. So you need to understand what is SDN and how it works. Especially it has a 3 layers. One is called as a management plane. second is basically called as a control plane, and third is basically called as a data plane. Okay, so you can refer Cybex, or you can refer a study guide, or you can refer the CCSP second edition, and these books has basically explained better about this SDN. I would also recommend you can refer the NIST SDN white paper. They have given the better understanding about how SDN works. Control plane play a very important role to coordinate between the data plane and management plane. This is the important statement you need to remember, and you need to also understand how it is basically play an important role. Important thing in the module 1, we talk about the compute. So in compute, we you need to have a good understanding of a computation, because we're talking about multiple servers in which we have a RAM and CPU. Okay, we are using a RAM and CPU of each and every server. On top of it, we host the virtualization. So we're going to discuss about reservation. That is important from the exam point of view. Reservation is there. Second is the limit. That is another important topic. You need to understand the limit usage and in which condition we have to use the share. Okay, so reservation is there, limit is there, and share is there. So in virtualization, we're basically going to understand about the two type of threats: type 1 virtualization and their associate security, and type 2 virtualization, their associate security. The biggest concern in the virtualization machine is just a file which can be stored somewhere in the server, and it can be moved from one server to another server. So I believe you got an understanding about what is covered in the module 1 of our domain 3, comprehend cloud infrastructure component. So you can say like that we are going to cover all the building blocks which is required to drive the cloud services, or for building a cloud services. The second part is, because cloud is driven through a data center only, so it is very important for you to understand the concept of how to secure the data centers. So we're going to discuss about some kind of attributes of the data interoperability and portability. It depending upon what kind of a service you're going to host in the data center. You have a two choice in the physical design, whether you need to buy or whether you need to build. Definitely, if you're looking for a governance, if you're looking for a data security controls, then build is a better option. But if you're looking for the cost over the governance, then we can go for a buy, where we're using this Amazon private services and all that, or we can go for the control as kind of a companies who can provide us a server on rent on which we can host our services. Buy exclusively is like a shift of capex to opex, capex to opex, capital expenditure to the operational expenditure, whereas a build is exclusively for the capex only, because you own the entire hardware and everything. In this domain, actually secure data center, when I say, it is completely talking about how we build a secure data center from a basic. Okay, so in this domain we also going to understand about the suppression system. Okay, we're going to discuss about the suppression system. That is important in the exam. So we have a class A, class B, class C, class D. A for ash, B for boil, C for current, D for dilute. This is how you can remember, because suppression system is a corrective control that must required in the data center. Then another important thing which is required to understand is cooling. Okay, cooling play a very important role in the data center. Investment in the cooling system depending upon how much heat you wish to remove from the data center. So that is why we have HVAC in the organization. Especially you need to remember the temperature range from the exam point of view. So we have a temperature range as per the ASHRAE standard, ASHRAE. So as per the ASHRAE standard, we have a temperature like 18 to 27 degree Celsius and 64 to 81 Fahrenheit. Okay, 64 to 81 Fahrenheit. Okay, so you must be aware about the temperature standard. We have a two type of cooling in the organization. One is called latent and sensible. We are expecting a sensible cooling in the data center because that remove the heat, and the latent cooling is basically remove the moisture. You need to also understand, as we're talking about data center, so uptime institute is very important, because whenever the data center we basically plan and all that. Okay, whenever we basically plan the data center, we design data center as per the uptime institute, and further for that we can go for the certifications. So uptime institute is basically coming with their tier 1 tier 2, tier 3 and tier 4. We have four standards here. For example, tier 4 is used for the fault tolerant site infrastructure where we need a criticality. So one of the highest uptime we basically maintain the tier 4, which is called 99.5 times 9. This is also you need to understand from the exam point of view. You need to have a good understanding of which tier is basically used for what reasons, or if I'm building a data center, which tier should be ideally required for my organization. One more important thing which I found in the 2019 syllabus is called as a protection class. Protection class, which is again a part of the secure data center protection class. So if you want a more information about the protection class, I would recommend you to refer the ISO standard, which is called as a 222372. Okay, 222372. So that is a standard which talk about the protection and availability classes. Okay, so it will basically give you a good understanding of the site of the data center protection class. So these are the two important modules we have in the domain 3. Now let's move to the next domain. Sorry, let's move to the next module. So we have a third module also that we need to understand. The third module is basically called as analyze the risk associated with the cloud infrastructure. In this section, you must know the top threats to the cloud computing, which allow an organization to reduce the attack surface by selecting the appropriate countermeasures. As per this module of a domain 3, it's very important for the CCSP, especially the countermeasure strategies. This is something is a new emerging topic in a CCSP 2019 syllabus, where we're going to discuss about the zero trust architecture. We have micro segmentations. Okay, so you need to have a good understanding of the micro segmentations. Okay, and also cyber kill chain. Because of the dynamic environment of a cloud, it is easy to define the persistent threat in the cloud environment by the intruder. So you need to have a good understanding of a cyber kill chain. Okay, because in this parameter, in this module, we are talking about the functions we can take to reduce the attack surface, and that is only possible when you select the appropriate countermeasures. So the risk related to the cloud environment, vulnerability, threats, attacks. So you need to understand the different type of risk. So you need to understand the different type of risk associated on the different type of cloud service models, because we have a IaaS, we have a PaaS, and we have a SaaS. So what are the type of risk associated in each and every services? That is what we need to understand from the exam point of view. So that is basically covered in the cloud vulnerability, threats, and attack. You need to also have a good understanding of the risk assessment and analysis. Okay, we have a different type of risk associated on the cloud environment. Okay, if you're going for the scalability, what is the opposite as a risk of a scalability? If you're going to use cloud as a mobility, what are the risks associated with the mobility? So when you refer this section, please give more attention to the cloud feature as a risk environment from the exam point of view, because that is also testable. I would suggest you to refer the CCSP domain 1 for the risk management, because that give you a good visibility about the risk assessment and risk management functions. So identifying the risk, analyzing the risk, evaluating a risk, treatment of the risk, that understanding is required. Also, we need to understand the risk associated with the cloud environment. You must also understand the different type of a virtualization risk that is also required from the exam point of view. So when you're talking about the virtualization risk, like example, security flaw in the hypervisor. Okay, so security flaw in the hypervisor. And the second most important is inter-VM attack. Inter-VM attack. So flaw in the hypervisor and inter-VM attack is very important for you to understand. As I discussed, countermeasure strategy is a part of a new 2019 syllabus where we're going to discuss about the zero trust model, okay, and the micro segmentation. So these are the two important section which is included in the countermeasure strategy. So don't be surprised if you don't get questions from this area with the combination of SDN, because SDN also used for the logical segmentation. Today your cloud is, the backend is driven based on SDN, so definitely SDN is testable in the exam. So there all three layers are very important from the exam point of view. So the next section is basically next module in this domain is called as a design and plan security controls. That is another section we have. Okay, design and plan security control. So data center should have a hardware and virtualization protection at the component level. So we have one concept called as a VPC. Okay, VPC stand for Virtual Private Cloud Protection. So VPC protection is a fundamental protection in the public cloud consumption as well as key attribute of a security group. So you need to have a good understanding of VPC and security group. If you fail to understand that, then I will recommend you to review some Amazon videos of VPC and security group, how it works, because it's damn testable in the exam. Okay, it's important from the exam point of view. Okay, because these are the two functions is used to create a logical segmentations in the cloud environment. We also have a hardware based protection which is basically called as a TPM. TPM is basically used to providing a security to the server itself. Okay, which is basically used to provide not only the physical security and also logical security. So TPM is like a chip which is in a server. It's like a crypto processor which encrypt the entire system. So tomorrow, if we have a physical theft and all that, still we able to maintain the persistent security in the cloud in the server environment. It is more from the point of view of the companies who basically host the data center. And if you take a reference of a cloud provider and customer, this is more from the point of view of the cloud provider. Okay, because isolation is very important in a multi-tenant environment. So VPC, security group, microsegmentation, zero trust, SDN, these are basically used for this only. Okay, so isolation of a management network with respect to the other network need to be considered. All those things you need to understand from the domain 3 point of view. Okay, another important thing which is required, which is not been addressed here, is good understanding of the CMP. The CMP basically stand for cloud management plane. So cloud provider is responsible for initiating and managing the management plane. Okay, one thing you need to remember. So cloud provider is basically responsible for initiating and managing the management plane. Okay, whereas the cloud consumer is responsible for properly configuring the management plane. Clear? So cloud consumer is there. Okay, another important topic which is required to understand is cloud orchestration. Automation in the cloud is driven through a cloud orchestration. So you need to have a good understanding of the cloud orchestration, which is basically an end-to-end automation flow. Another important thing is how to perform identification, authentication, authorization infrastructure in the cloud. So in this section, we're going to discuss about SAML. I'm not going to cover much in detail SAML in this domain. I'm going to discuss in the domain 4. So SAML is very important, especially what kind of information we exchange between the server and provider, or you can say like a relaying party and identity provider, which is called as a token. So SAML is testable in the exam. What kind of a server we have in the SAML? It is used for the federation. Then XACML is testable in the exam, which is purely for the authorization, along with that OAuth and OpenID. So I'm going to discuss in detail in the domain 4. I'm just giving a high level overview how the IEEE works in the cloud environment. And to collect the logs, packets, capture and all that, integrating SIM or CASB, how to integrate SIM, what are the challenges we have in the SIM implementation, that is something we're going to cover in this particular module. Summary is very simple. Once we assess the risk in the module 3 of our domain 3, we need to organize the control. So we need a control on the environmental level, which is on-prem or off-prem. Definitely it always on-prem. So we are considering this reference of a design and plan security control more from the point of view of a cloud provider. So suppose you're working for the cloud provider, what kind of a risk associated with that? So according to that, we need to implement the necessary controls. So it's covered from that point of view. Okay, like virtualization system protection, we know VM just as a file. Okay, so VM is just a file, so we need a persistent protection in the system itself. So TPM is there to protect the entire server, so VMs cannot be movable easily. Then cloud management plan is basically there by which we manage the entire setup. What is the role of a cloud provider toward the cloud management plane? What is the responsibility of a cloud consumer toward the cloud management plane? That we need to understand, and you must refer that when you're covering the domain 3 and cloud orchestration. So that is basically the important part of the module 4. Next is called as a domain 3, module 5, plan disaster recovery and business continuity. So ISO 22301 is a standard we used for the BCMS 22301. Okay, which define the business continuity as the capability of an organization to continue delivery of a product and services within an acceptable time frame at predefined capacity relating to the disruption. So we also have another standard which is called as a 27031. 27031 is basically called as a defined as a disaster recovery, okay, which having a ability of information and communication technology element of an organization to support the critical business function to an acceptable level. So BCP and DR, you need to have a good understanding of that. Again, I can refer you to refer the CSSP videos of a BCP and DR. That videos will be really a great helpful for you answering the questions in the CCSP exam, because the way the content has been covered about BCP and DR in the CCSP, you need to have a better understanding of those contents. You need to have a detailed understanding of the content because your cloud is depending upon the availability. In this section, which is called as a plan disaster recovery and business continuity, we are talking about how to maintain the continuity of the cloud provider. The cloud provider also look for the alternate site, or suppose we have a on-prem data center. Suppose we have a on-prem data center. So we basically using cloud as a secondary backup. Okay, we using cloud as a secondary site, or cloud is basically using another as a secondary site. So we're going to discuss about these scenarios because that is the most important element in this section. Okay, so summary is very simple. I'm basically running my own data center, okay, on-prem. Now I cannot completely depending upon my on-prem data center, so I'm planning to use cloud as a secondary site. Okay, so I can able to shift, like in the COVID-19 people are working from home, so we have shift the entire load on the cloud. So what can be the scenario in which we can move to the cloud? Then second is Amazon using their secondary site in the another availability zone. So if one availability zone is down, then what is the transfer capability to the another availability zone? The third option is basically where we as a customer using two different providers, one primary like Azure and second is AWS. So we have a three type of scenarios that we need to understand from a BCDR point of view, which is called as a on-prem, okay, on-prem, which is called on-prem data center, and cloud as a BCDR. Second is basically called as a on-prem, okay, sorry, cloud consumer, I'm sorry. The second is basically called as a cloud consumer, and primary provider BCDR, and third is cloud consumer, okay, and alternative provider BCDR. In which condition we can go for it, that is testable in the exam. So as I said, we have a data center on-prem and we're using cloud as a secondary site, and this is the first example. Cloud is basically have a two availability zone. If one availability zone is down, we can basically move to another availability zone, or one region to another region. That is basically called cloud consumer primary provider BCDR. Or in this case, the customer is basically using a two different provider, AWS and Azure. So if AWS is down, we can basically move to Azure. Mostly we go for this scenario in that case because of data localization. Now Amazon basically have another region in another country. Suppose their region is basically there in Singapore, or they have another region in Australia, but data cannot be local, data cannot be moved, data must be localized in India itself. So what we did, we mutually decided to have a Azure region in India and AWS region in India. So in that case, we can go for the third scenario, which is called as a cloud consumer alternate provider BCDR. So you need to understand in this module, we are going to discuss about a cloud provider, their strategy to maintain the continuity, or a cloud consumer using a cloud as a BCDR strategy. So good understanding of a BCDR strategy risk is also required. Example, you're migrating your on-prem to cloud, data sharing is there, functionality replication is there, what kind of a BIA matrix will be there. So that is also very important for you to understand. And along with that, you need to have a very good understanding of the RTO, the time it take to restore the services. RPO is all about acceptable data loss, and MTD is the acceptable downtime that is agreed between the customer and provider. Your entire BCDR strategy is driven based on the MTD. Ultimate goal of restoring a service in a BCPDR is to achieve the MTD. MTD is something you agreed with the customer. RTO is less than MTD, and RPO is also agreed with the customer. Your RTO strategy is always driven based on the MTD. So you need to remember the definition. You need to understand the definition of MTD, RTO, and RPO, because BIA using this matrix only to prioritize the resources. Okay, last important thing is that once you basically prepare the plan, you need to test the plan. Ultimate goal of testing the BCP plan is to update the plan. Just imagine I have a BCP plan, how to move services in a cloud in the case of disaster. So we're going to discuss about the walkthrough. We have a simulation test. We have a on-prem test. So we have a different type of testing of the BCP DR plan. Okay, walkthrough is there. Okay, mock drill is there. Okay, in parallel testing is there, on testing is there. So ultimate goal of testing the BCP plan is to update the plan. Ultimate goal of a testing the plan is to ensure that we can able to restore the service in a defined time period. So this is all we have in this particular domain. So summary is very simple: uptime institute, compute types, okay, then virtualization security, countermeasure strategies, cloud segmentations, cloud management plan, SDN, BCDR scenarios, MTD, RTO, and RPO. I would recommend you to refer the CSSP for that. So these are the important sections we have in the domain 3. I'm planning to launch the domain 4 video very soon. Okay. Thank you for your time, and please do share my videos. Your comments will really motivate me to improve my next video series. Thank you. Bye.